Well, US and Iranian diplomats have held indirect talks in the Gulf state of Oman aimed at easing tensions between the two sides. The American delegation, led by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, wants Iran to cut back on its nuclear program. Washington also wants Tehran to end its support for terror groups across the region and lift the crackdown on anti-government protesters. Iran's foreign minister described the talks as a good start, insisting, though, that they only spoke about the country's nuclear program. It's great to welcome Ben Friedman now, the policy director for the think tank Defence Priorities in Washington, D.C. Hi there, Ben. Now, Iran says these discussions got off to a good start, though the US has slapped new sanctions on Iran's energy sector. It's not clear, though, if that's directly linked to what these talks happen today. What's your reading of where things stand?
Well, I think it was a productive day. It wasn't clear even a few days ago that we'd have an exchange, indirect as it was, this positive with the Iranians, where it didn't end in acrimony. So that's positive. I think the big question really concerns whether the Trump administration will restrain its impulse to sort of ask for the moon and almost force a potential deal in Iran that they can't possibly sign without humiliation. So I think, I'm worried that will happen, if we try to include ballistic missile restrictions, restrictions on Iranian ties to other groups in the region, that it will basically collapse any chance of getting a deal on the nukes. And then President Trump might decide to go to war over the failure of talks, or the Israelis might talk him into it again. So that's the big risk here.
Could you explain what you mean a bit more? Are you sort of saying that the Trump administration might be asking for too much and in so doing get nothing at all?
Yes. I mean, the Trump administration in the spring, began approaching talks, I think, somewhat positively, if in a somewhat underinformed way, where they were trying to get back into some deal, sort of like the JCPOA. And then it came to pass that the United States asked for zero enrichment, which the Iranians couldn't accept. And that, along with the deadline, gave the Israelis an excuse, essentially, to bomb them. And the United States, of course, got pulled into it. So now, we've said we want to talk about ballistic missiles and Iranian support for groups in the region. And again, we've been talking about zero enrichment. So if all those things were really to be included, I think this is what they were discussing today, what the talks would be about. But if all that were really to be included, the demands, I think, would just be too great, and the Iranians would be in a position where I think they'd rather be attacked again than submit to a deal that makes them look so bad that would give them domestic political problems. So I don't think they could do that.
Part of what has been a problem so far is that the two sides seem to disagree on the scope of the talks. Given that, how difficult do you expect, and what you've also just said, that negotiations between the two sides will be if and when it does progress to negotiations?
Well, I think the sort of talks about talks are in some ways the real difficulty in that, if the United States, as I just said, insists on too much and including too many things, it's going to be a problem. I think the Iranians actually might be very open down the road to negotiating on those matters. There's reasons to think that they might be fine with reducing their support to Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and in some ways that issue's been solved for them by the Israeli attacks on Hezbollah. But I don't think they want to do that now. So I think that, if we actually get to the point where we're really talking about the nuclear program, I think we could have a deal. I think the Iranians are desperate to sign a deal, and the president of the United States seems almost equally desperate. The issue is all the people who work for him who get him to sort of want to have a much more comprehensive deal, and one that will include zero enrichment. So if it's just left to Trump and the Iranians, I think we could have a deal pretty fast.
Let's talk finally about the Iranian opposition, both inside and outside of the country. They want an end to the Islamic Republic. Do they have a say in these negotiations at all, or are they a factor in this?
I don't think they're a factor to a significant extent. I mean, the Trump administration is excessively and notoriously close to the Israeli government. The Israeli government, in some ways, is linked to at least some of the more anti-regime protesters, and wants to make trouble, wants to create a process that will lead to regime change. So, in some ways, they're getting their foot in the door that way. There are people in the Trump administration who might think similarly. But, I think at the top of the Trump administration with Witkoff and the president, and of course with the Iranian government, no, I don't think the protesters are really, in a direct sense, a participant in the talks.
Thanks a lot for that, Ben. We've been speaking with Ben Friedman, Policy Director for Defence Priorities in Washington, D.C.
Thank you.